Now, in regards to Torah portion Yitro, if you have your Bible, make sure it's opened up to Exodus chapter 18. And I want to just make a couple of preliminary remarks. Number one, last time we were looking at spiritual battles in the life of the believer, and those were representative of two different types of battles, with Egypt, the adversary, and Amalek, the flesh. So that our spiritual battles were really having to do with fighting our spiritual warfare, so to speak, has to do with us doing battle against our flesh. Not likely demons and fighting Satan and stuff like that. I mentioned to you that if you feel like you have known people or have demon infestation or whatever, demons are like cockroaches and flies. When you clean up the garbage, they disappear. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Our real spiritual battle is with our own selves, with our own flesh, learning to put down our flesh and gain control of it, because Amalek is a representation of our fleshly appetites. This time, in Torah portion Yitro, we're going to see Elohim meeting the people at the mountain. And we're also going to receive the commands. Now, this is a jam-packed Torah portion, which is super awesome, and I'm super excited to talk with you about it. However, I'm also super sad because there's so much information here that I can't possibly share it with you. But what I want to point out here is that as we enter, we're starting to move away a little bit from the narrative portion of the scripture in Genesis, where we mostly have stories, loaded stories, deeply meaningful stories, nevertheless narrative structure of stories. But now, moving forward, the stories are going to become fewer and farther in between, and we're going to be getting instruction. This is the heart of the Torah, and we're going to need to pay close attention to all of these commands, and they're starting now. They started last week and a little bit before that. And we've been able to extrapolate some good principles and commands for ourselves from the early book of the Torah, Genesis or Bereshit. But now it's going to become more explicit. And I think what we need to be considerate of is, what does this mean on a practical level? How can we actually use these commands? What is the spiritual deeper level? Meaning, is there some type of spiritual warfare that we need to conduct within ourselves to gain a higher insight, to gain a more spiritual application of these things? So as we read this evening, we're going to get the 10 commands, or the 10 words, the Esra Devarim, from the words of Yah's mouth. And we're going to look at them a little bit more carefully and see how can we apply them to our lives. But I want to, before we start getting into this, give you a little bit of a conceptual framework, okay? Because what we're looking at is essentially 613 commands if you look at them according to the way the rabbis, calculate them. Who knows? It doesn't matter. There are a lot of instructions here. You know, of course, that some of them don't apply to you, some of them do. But here's the important part. You can, generally speaking, put these things into two buckets. I like to call them vertical commands and horizontal commands. What do the vertical commands deal with? Well, that deals with you and your direct relationship with our Father in heaven. They are commands that guide and inform that relationship. All of the other commands are horizontal. They are between you and her, you and him. These are people around you. You need to learn how to get along and play well with others. All of the remainder of those commands are related to you loving your neighbor as yourself. The commands that are vertical are far fewer than the ones that are horizontal. But I want to point out to you a couple of interesting things. In regards to the vertical commands, these are just general principles that I think you'll find apply as we dig a little deeper. The vertical commands are the ones that keep us connected to our Father in heaven. What you need to recognize, I think, is that our Father in heaven is continuously reaching down from above to pull you up by your bootstraps, to pull you up, to lift you up. He is continuously doing that. The problem is that we, by our behavior, slap his hands away. We're swatting at him like flies saying, leave me alone, don't touch me. Or we'll put something in the way of that relationship, whether it be idolatry, uncleanness. It could be any number of things, any number of behaviors that we can engage in, or even thoughts that we have, wrong ways of looking at the world, looking at our relationship with him, that will sever that relationship, that will at least impede that relationship. And the vertical commands that Father gives us are given to us to enable a free flow of information and help and support and strength back and forth between us and our Heavenly Father. Those are the vertical commands. Now, we get our spiritual power from our Father in heaven via observing these vertical commands that keep us unstained and keep that flow uninterrupted as much as possible. But we often defile ourselves, as I suggested, and interrupt this flow. Now, here's something that I want you to consider. Many of the vertical commands also have a community element. They also have a horizontal element. Because consider, many of the commands related to these vertical commands between us and our Father are related to Shabbat, are related to the feasts and the holy days, are related to going into the temple or the tabernacle area and making sacrifice. And there's always elements that are attached to it that have something to do with other people. Remember, for example, on Shabbat, we are commanded to have a Mikra Kodesh or Kodesh Mikra, a holy convocation, a getting together and a reading, which is exactly what we're doing now. This is community. So there are community elements of lots of the vertical commands. So the community elements are really important. And I've told you this many, many times, and I'll repeat it until I'm blue in the face because it's that important. Our Father owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills, and he needs nothing from you. He literally needs nothing from you. What he wants from you is to treat each other right. Remember what Yeshua said, the same thing. Well, they're going to say to me, when did we do this for you? And when did we do that for you? Well, to the degree that you did this to the least of my people, you did it for me. Okay, so our Father doesn't need anything from you. He wants for you to serve each other. That is how you serve him. So just consider that as we start getting into some of these commands. The horizontal commands teach us to love and serve others, and being in a community like this one enables us to learn to place our needs and our wants and our desires below the needs of others. And we learn, and this is us taking on, this is what it means to be made in the image of God. Because when we get together, we are creating order out of chaos. You know, for some time, we get into these smaller groups and everything is very comfortable. And then some new people come, and we have some growing pains, and we have some issues that have to be worked out. And that things become uncomfortable, and then we work through it and we learn how to organize that chaos. We're in one of those stages now where there has been a good influx of people, and we're having 40, 45 people right here in my little house every Shabbat. Well, that's going to give us a wonderful opportunity to iron out some stuff, to create some order out of chaos. And you can see that we're trying to do that by using the commands that Father gives us horizontally to learn to love one another. We learn to organize things, we learn to make concessions, we learn to overlook minor faults, and we learn to get along and to love one another. This is what the commandments are all about. And I want you to look at them from that perspective. That is a spiritual understanding of the commands. Now, you can take literally, I need to do this, I need to not do that. That's important, but it's for the purpose of these relationships. So, with that preamble, as we look at these commands, we'll want to do so in a practical and a spiritual way. What do we need to do literally with these commands? Is there a spiritual application that we can take a little bit deeper? And you might think to yourself, you have heard it said, but I say unto you. What would our Messiah, Yeshua, say in regards to this command? Is there some deeper level that we can take a look at in that regard? And then the question might be that we need to ask ourselves, what is the spiritual warfare that I need to do in my own spirit that is going to help me to be a better warrior as I tackle these instructions? Fair enough? And there's the preamble. I'm about to bust out the Bible and read it with you. Any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the preamble of our discussion? You're also quiet. Why don't somebody say something just to make sure that the system's working?
It's working.
We can hear you.
All right. I can hear you also. Here we go. If you have your Bible, open it up to chapter 18. Who is it? It's Daryl. What's up, Daryl?
Hey, I just wanted to say that was one of the best preambles I've ever heard. And I've been to the hard school of Knox, and I have a PhD in that. So that's up to you, Alan. Thank you for that word.
Thank you, Daryl. Hey, by the way, before you walk away, how is the weather in Minnesota? Is it lovely in Minnesota?
Absolutely not. It was like 30 below a couple days ago. It was like 19 below yesterday or whatever, and it's snowing out, and it's been snowing all day. So
oh no,
not so good.
Well, you hang in there.
Enjoy what you've got.
Yeah, you hang in there for another month or so. It'll turn into spring.
Yes, we're looking forward to that for sure.
Awesome. Hang in there, guys. Great to talk to you. All right.
Thank you.
So now we're going to our Bible, and we have Exodus chapter 18. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can read with me if you like. And I'm just going to read a portion, an important portion. Here it is. It is Exodus 18. Starting in verse 7 is where I want to start. Okay, here's what it says. So Moshe went out to meet his father-in-law. This is Jethro shows up with his wife and his 2 sons, where they had been in Midian. And he bowed down and then kissed him. And they asked each other after how they had been, and then he went into the tent, and Moses recounted to his father-in-law all that Yah had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that confronted them on the way, and how Yah delivered them. Now, Yitro rejoiced over all the good things Yah had done for Israel when he rescued them from the power of the Egyptians. Baruch Yehovah. That's the first time that ever appears in Scripture. Right there from the mouth of a Gentile named Yitro. Baruch Yehovah, Jethro exclaimed, the one who rescued you from Pharaoh and the power of the Egyptians and snatched the people from the power of the Egyptians. Now I know that Yah is greater than all gods, because he did wonders when the Egyptians acted arrogantly against Israel. And then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to Elohim, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moshe's father-in-law in Elohim's presence. The next day Moshe sat down to judge the people, and they stood around Moses from morning until evening. When Moshe's father-in-law saw everything that he was doing for them, he asked, What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why are you alone sitting as judge while all the people stand around you from morning until evening? And Moses replied, Well, because the people come to me to inquire of Elohim. Whenever they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I make a decision between one man and another. I teach them Elohim's statutes and laws. What you're doing is not good, Moshe's father-in-law said to him. You will certainly wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, because the task is too heavy for you. You can't do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you some advice, and Elohim be with you. You be the one to represent the people before Elohim and bring their cases to him. instruct them about the statutes and laws, and teach them the way to live and what they must do. But you should select from all the people able men, Elohim-fearing, trustworthy, and hating bribery. Place them over the people as commanders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They should judge the people at all times. Then they can bring you every important case, but judge every minor case for themselves. In this way you will lighten your load, and they will bear it with you. If you do this, and Elohim so directs you, you will be able to endure, and also all these people will be able to go home satisfied. Moshe listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. So Moshe chose able men from all Israel and made them leaders over the people, as commanders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They judged the people at all times. They would bring the hard cases to Moshe, but they would judge every minor case themselves. Then Moshe said goodbye to his father-in-law, and he journeyed to his own land. Now, there are some fascinating things going on in this passage, and I want to just draw your attention to an interesting part that I found quite fascinating. Right there in verse 7, it's quite fascinating that it says this, that Moshe went out. Oops, I'm in the book of Deuteronomy. I apologize. Hold on just a sec. Right at verse 7, it says, Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him. Now, why would Moshe bow down to his father-in-law? If you want to speak, you may at any time. Just unmute yourself. Yeah, Gabby. Well, raise your hand first. That's a great idea. We're going to pretend we're in 7th grade again. This is all good. Yeah, Gabby, what do you think?
Well, it's his elder, and it's the father of his wife, and he took him in when he was wandering in the desert, and
he's also a priest.
Yes, good insight. All of those things are absolutely true. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. He is actually honoring his father-in-law. He is actually demonstrating what is going to become a command in chapter 20 here in just a few minutes: honor your father and mother. He is actually honoring his father. And it literally says that he bowed with his face to the ground. You know, that's a very instructive thing, because very often you only see people bowing with their face to the ground when it's a worshiper of God. And yet, I think many of us know the commandments well enough to recognize that, bless you, when you are learning to honor authority figures, it starts with your parents. Because if you'll have a heck of a hard time learning to honor your Father in heaven if you have no honor for your earthly father. And that's very difficult, because some of us have had earthly fathers who were not worth a hill of beans. And that's really, really challenging, to learn to be honoring of a father who is not worthy of honor. And that makes our task of learning to revere and honor our Father in heaven that much more difficult. However, we must do so. And there is a way to honor your earthly father, even if he is an unhonorable, dishonorable person. There is a way to do that, and that's the spiritual application of that command. Now, Moshe is, we have already heard, both is a paradox, a little bit of a paradox, because he is the most humble man who walks on the earth, we are told in the Torah, but he's also greatly honored amongst the court of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And he's also obviously honored by his father-in-law. He's leading, he is now the spiritual and military, I guess Joshua is also like a commander or co-commander of this vast throng of people that is 2.5, 3 million people possibly. So Moshe is an interesting dichotomy of a very humble man and a very powerful man. But he is willing to humble himself, and even to the point of bowing down with his face towards the ground in honor of his father-in-law, who is possibly not even a believer. Now you might say, well, he just made a profession of faith. That's actually not a bad idea. It's very possible and very perhaps likely that Yitro just made a profession of faith and has converted to the worship of this God. Mike?
It's actually Tracy.
Oh, sorry, Tracy.
Yeah, you wouldn't know.
I wouldn't. If you showed me your wonderful face, I would know.
Oh, okay, hang on.
I'm kidding. Oh, look there, she's so pretty.
I was just going to point out, I think it's also interesting that Moses did the same thing to Korah and his company when they came and confronted him. So
Yeah.
I always take like some kind of instruction from that too.
100%.
That he humbled himself to these people that were coming against him.
Yeah. Awesome insight, Tracy. I know I can always count on you. That's a great insight. And it's just, he is willing to humble himself. And this is such a powerful instruction. But you know, what's even better is that the advice from his father-in-law is so powerful. There is a tremendous power in instruction right there, that we can't take on too much for ourselves. And you know, I find it challenging sometimes to lead this little fellowship, and I've complained about it repeatedly. But you know, being the worship leader and the teacher and the guy who's opening his house, and you know, it's a lot of work. But you know what? Let that be a plea to those of you to come to me and offer me help. That'd be awesome. I keep saying I want somebody who knows how to play the guitar and come up here and lead worship. That'd be fantastic. But yes, you need people to stand up and help out as much as possible. Delegating tasks to trusted men. And this actually reminds me a lot of 1 Timothy, the instructions that Paul gives to Timothy regarding finding able-bodied men to lead fellowship, to be elders of a congregation, who are God-fearing and have control of their own families and do not desire gain. So this is an early iteration of that very same principle. So, organizing chaos. Here's just another aspect of becoming more and more like our Father in heaven, figuring out how to organize people. And why do we do it? Unfortunately, all things that Father gives us, our adversary takes them and twists them and perverts them. Now, what our adversary does is he takes these positions of power and people go after them and try to grab that power so that they can wield it over others below them, and it makes them feel great about themselves. The very best leader, I have to wonder, you know, you notice what that text says that Jethro was telling his father-in-law and saying, he says, I will give you some counsel in verse 19, and God be with you. You be the people's representative, and you bring these things to God and everything. But you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God. These are not volunteers. These are voluntolds. Okay, these are people who are known entities in the community. Someone of reputation, someone who has a reputation for being honorable and God-fearing, and we say, you need to help. And you know what? They probably do. And some of them would say no. And that's the person you want even more. The person who says, no. Now, sometimes I'm too busy, I got other things to do, and that's okay. You got to let some people off the hook. However, what you really do want is somebody who says, no, I'm not interested in a position of leadership, because those make the best leaders. But that's exactly what Moses did, yes. That's exactly what Moses did. When Father says, I'm sending you, and he's like, no, send somebody else. Now, you can't tell God no. That's not a great idea. And he pushed back a little too hard. However, note that these men are selected. These are select men. They are not men who stood up and said, me. I want to lead. So that's just a bad sign. So their is some really poignant and powerful stuff regarding organization and leadership. And what's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of this? To create order out of chaos. This is exactly what he's telling them. This is terrible. You got these people waiting around from morning until evening. You're wearing yourself out. You're wearing the people out. People are getting grumpy and grumbling and standing in line. I mean, who wants to stand in a bureaucratic line all day long? This is terrible. This ain't working out very good at all. You're not serving each other effectively. But note the whole point here, to serve each other effectively. This is not effective service. It's too confusing. It doesn't work very well. Bureaucracy is evil. You know what's funny? It just occurred to me that Yitro could have been called Elon Musk. Isn't that funny? He is Jethro is popping up saying, I will be the head of the Department of Government Efficiency. And he gave him the job. Moses said, yeah, that sounds great. Well, we could use your help. And he's helping out. He's clearing out some of the bureaucracy. So that's pretty interesting. Now, I want to go on to, you like that? Yeah. Exodus chapter 19. I'm going to go on to Exodus chapter 19, starting in verse 4, because now we're going to talk about this pledge and the betrothal. You guys know this stuff. I'm kind of reiterating some things that you undoubtedly already know, but I want to go over it anyway because it's pretty important. So let me share my screen with you one more time, and we'll do a little bit more reading. So now we're in Exodus, I keep seeing Genesis. Exodus 19, chapter 4. This is Yah speaking to Moshe, and he says, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now, if you will listen to me and carefully keep my covenant, you will be my own possession, Am Segula, a treasured possession out of all the peoples. Although all the earth is mine, there's that note that says I don't need anything from you. And you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. These are the words that you are to say to the Israelites. Now, these people have great potential to be priests and representatives of this awesome God in heaven. But with it comes great responsibility. Great responsibility. If we do what is right, verse 5, if you will listen to me and carefully guard my covenant, then you will be these wonderful things. They could be priests to the whole earth. However, they must be pure and obedient to his words. Now, moving forward just a little bit to verse 8, it says this, and all the people answered together once they heard these words that Yah was speaking and Moshe relaying them to them, and said, all that Yah has spoken we will do. There's your I do of a betrothal or a marriage ceremony. And Moshe returned the words of the people unto Yah, and Yah said unto Moshe, lo, I come to thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and believe you forever. And Moshe told the words of the people unto Yah, and Yah said unto Moshe, go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the third day. For the third day Yah will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Now, here in verse 8 through whatever that is, 11, we have some interesting discussion to take place here. What is happening here is Moshe is instructed to kadosh these people, sanctify them. How can you sanctify yourself? What does the text actually say? It just simply says that God tells Moses, sanctify these people. How does he do that? Can they sanctify themselves? Is Moshe sanctifying them? What does that mean? And how can you do that? Anyone know? Anybody have any ideas? Osmundo.
I believe is the part, I remember where it says, he told everybody, the men, not to come near their wives for 3 days to set themselves apart, so remaining ceremonially pure.
Okay. Okay. That's a fascinating thing that you mentioned, and I'm going to come to that in just a moment. But note that God actually did not say that. Moshe did. There's an interesting distinction there. And not that I think that's a bad idea. I'm not suggesting I disagree with Moshe. Just note that Moshe included that. God did not. What did God say specifically? Sanctify these people and have them wash their clothes. That's what Father said. Specifically. Brett?
Leviticus 19 talks about what the Kadashim, what things that you do for sanctification.
Okay, that's an excellent insight. Now that'll come a little bit later, but we have no reason to believe that at least Moshe and Aaron might have some insight into what that means and could instruct these people in that regard. Would you suggest that that's the case, Brett?
Well, they're going to get it in Exodus 20,
Right.
but he already starting to tell them that.
Right, right. And I think that that is a good insight, Brett, because what you often do when you are instructing someone who doesn't exactly know the ins and outs is you give them a brief overview, a preamble, just like I did when I was starting this teaching. It's like Moshe says, okay, we're going to sanctify ourselves. And I'm sure that there were a lot of people going, well, what does that mean? I got to wash my clothes. Okay, that's an interesting thing. And then, of course, Moshe actually telling them, yeah, don't go near your wives. Okay, so this is interesting. And I would suggest to you that based upon the previous passage that I read to you from Exodus 19, verse 4, it says, what does it say? That Yah snatched these people out of Egypt and carried them on eagle's wings and brought them to himself. That, my friends, is sanctification. Only Father can sanctify anything. Make it holy. Sanctification is nothing more than holiness, making something holy. In fact, I've mentioned to you on many occasions, and I'll repeat it here, if I take a bowl of red and green M&Ms and I separate the red ones from the green ones and I put the red ones in my own baggie because I like those best, I have just holified, I have made those red M&Ms holy by setting them apart from the other colors. Because I want those for myself. I have sanctified them. Only God is able to sanctify anything, ever. You cannot make yourself holy, ever, in any way, shape, or form. Don't even try. It's a ridiculous, ridiculous thing. However, our Father can make you holy. He can sanctify you through the blood of His Lamb, Yeshua the Messiah. The only thing you can do is defile yourself. You can make yourself unclean any number of ways, one of which is what Brett just discussed and what Moshe mentioned in his initial instructions. Yes, ma'am. Angela? Go ahead, sorry.
I just listened to a teacher. I'm going to see if I can explain this.
Could you talk louder, please?
I just listened to a teacher who addressed this issue of not going near a woman.
Not going near a woman?
Right. And, I think first we think, don't go near your wife, which means don't have sex for 3 days. And we're thinking very concretely and literally about it. But he pointed out that that word for wife, that's translated as wife, is woman. Don't go near a woman. And so he said, why don't you think about that woman in Proverbs? That woman that causes you to defile yourself, that woman who's on every street corner, the harlot, the adulteress, Babylon kind of thinking. So it's like, I have set you apart. Don't go back and mix with that woman before we get married.
Yeah. That's a great insight. It's a very spiritual insight, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But you would have to have a fairly spiritual, have people with a spirit-opened heart to be able to perceive instruction like that. And that would be probably challenging for some of these people, but some not so much. Very interesting insight, though. Brett.
Yeah, what Angela just said lines up with 1 Thessalonians 4:3, that the desire of Elohim, your set apartness, that you should abstain from whoring. So the sanctification, set apartness, holiness, same word.
Right.
And then the next verse, that each one of you should know how to possess his own vessel in set apartness and respect, not in passion of lust,
Right.
like the nations who do not know Elohim, which goes to Acts 15, one of the first of 4 things.
100%. 100%. Great insight, Brett. So what I would say, both of you had excellent insights that are making a lot of sense. And what I would say to you, I want to reiterate, you cannot sanctify yourself, but you can defile yourself. And what you can defile yourself with is a whole host of things. You could become defiled by drinking too much. Defiling yourself with liquor and wine. You could defile yourself with physical whoring, or you could defile yourself with spiritual whoring. Now, that is if you were worshiping a false god. Okay, but in our world, we're not quite as superstitious as in the ancient world, and we don't worship gods anymore. We worship things that have taken on the characteristics of gods, but we don't anthropomorphize trees and animals and pretend that they are gods. What we do is we worship systems, like medical systems, government systems, political philosophies, money. There are lots of things, ideas, and systems that we idolize. So can we trust in those things and thereby bring idolatry into our lives? 100%. Now, sexual immorality, eating unclean things, can also defile you. So, sexual immorality, let's deal with that one briefly, because Father says, sanctify them. I take that to mean, I want you to go to these people and I want you to remind them that they are sanctified. Remind them what does sanctification, teach them what does sanctification mean, and remind them that because I have pulled them out of Egypt and I have made them my own possession, they are sanctified. Teach them the meaning of the word sanctification. Let's start there. Then have them wash their clothing. Now, why would he do that? Well, because there's a certain element of, we know that Father says later on in I believe it's Leviticus, when you go out into the brush to do your business, make sure you take your spade with you and cover up your filth, because I move around in your camp and I am offended by uncleanness of that type. So you could literally say, okay, a smelly people that's all dirty is not appealing to our Father, although I don't think that's quite the purpose of his statement. What is more likely is that this is a deeper spiritual thing, that he's starting to introduce them to spiritual ideas and spiritual language. For example, we know that in the book of Revelation, it talks about these these people coming with the clouds, and they've been given clean white garments to wear. And it tells us literally that these clean white garments are literally representative of their deeds that they have done in the power of the Holy Spirit. So clean clothing, you know, and you can look at some of the parables of Yeshua, of a guy coming into a wedding feast and wearing the wrong clothing, and he's like, hey friend, I let you in here and I was nice, but what are you wearing? You're wearing the wrong stuff at this wedding feast. And they cast him out, throw him out into the outer darkness where there's weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. So I think that Moshe is here introducing the people to more spiritual elements at the same time as he is in inculcating into them and teaching them about what, bless you, what sanctification and holiness is. And then Moshe introduces what I would consider to be a fence around the Torah. You have heard this expression before, where we have a command and we decide, man, that's a bad thing. We don't want to do that. You know, if we build an additional rule that's just outside of that, then that'll protect that command, because I'd have to break through this barrier before I got to that one. And you can think of all kinds of practical applications for that. I have known men, for example, who have struggled with pornography that says, I can't have a laptop because if I have a laptop, I'll look at pornography. You've just built a fence around the command to keep yourself, sexually pure. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Remember that the rabbis build lots and lots and lots of fences around fences around fences. The problem comes when what? Somebody knows this. What is it?
You start telling other people they can't have a laptop either.
When you start telling other people that they can't have a laptop either. That's correct. When you take your fences that you've built around the Torah and you elevate them to the position of, I need to make sure that everybody else has the same fences around the Torah that I do. Okay, that's not right, because the Torah is the Torah is the Torah. That's the command. If you have a weakness and you need to build fences to protect yourself from that area of weakness, that's your business. That's your business. And we should watch out for each other in that regard. This is precisely why Paul said, look, we know that there's no such thing as any gods in this world aside from Yahweh, the Elohim, but to a pagan who is just converted out of paganism and you're eating meat that has been sacrificed to an idol, well, that's no big deal to you because you know that there are no other gods in the world. But to them, who has just come out of this pagan idolatry, and you're going to the meat market and buying this meat that has been sacrificed to the God that they used to worship, that is going to bother their conscience. It would not be right of you to say to them, hey man, get over it. There are no other gods in the world. Don't worry about it. No, you've just defiled their conscience. If they need to build a fence around this command to keep themselves pure of idolatry, and they say, no, I can't eat this meat sacrificed to an idol. You know what you say? No, you're right. I won't eat meat sacrificed to an idol either. Paul said, I'll never eat meat again if it offends my brother for whom Christ died. This is again sacrificing yourself for the good of your brother. So fences around the Torah are not a bad thing. Now, it would be completely inappropriate for this person who has built a fence to say, you must observe my fence. That would be inappropriate. But if someone wants to honor you so as to not make you stumble, then you should absolutely do that. And I think that this is precisely what Moshe is doing because he knows these people. They've been living in Egypt for at a minimum 215 years, at a maximum 400. You can calculate the math any way you want. Have they been engaged in some way in sexual immorality, having lived in Egypt for such a long time? Undoubtedly. Because they haven't gotten to Leviticus 19 yet, learning the rule, or 23, learning the rule, not 23, whatever. Is it 19, Brett? I think it's sexual immorality in regards to 19, yes. So they haven't yet learned the rules of sexual immorality. And so he tells them, look, I understand the commands that the Father has just given us. And I think that the best thing for you guys to do is to stay away from your wives for now. Because you have probably learned some principles while living in Egypt that would defile you. To you, what has been going on sexually in Egypt for the last several hundred years might seem totally normal, but it's not. And you're going to defile yourselves, and you'll die. Because, Father in chapter 19 gives some pretty strong instructions regarding some serious death penalty issues here. Mike or Tracy, whoever that happens to be.
It's Tracy.
What's up?
I wanted to go back to verse 9 for a second. Something stood out to me when I heard you reading.
Okay.
And that was when Yahweh says, Lo, I come unto it in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, Moses, and believe you forever. And I feel like that's really prophetic and important for us to hone in on, because Moses is the one that God spoke to face, and he's saying, I'm doing this so that the people will believe you forever.
Right.
Not until Messiah comes and does away with these words.
Yes.
But that these are words we're supposed to hear and believe forever because God spoke to him directly.
100%. Tracy, I'm so glad you brought that up. That is actually my next point. I would say to you that there are only two men who have ever walked this planet who are in the position of being an intermediary. Now, this is so true, Tracy. An intermediary is one who hears from God directly. We know that Father says, I speak to my buddy Moses face to face. I don't speak to him in dark riddles and sayings and visions and dreams that are obscure. I talk to him in plain language, face to face. He's getting direct instruction, and his job is to teach these people exactly what Father said. Now, Yeshua is the second person, the only of two who hears from Father directly. Now, even in a deeper sense, because not only is he's not speaking to God face to face like Moses, in a very weird and real sense, he is God. He has some weird connection to God that is completely inexplicable by me. He is God in some inexplicable, weird way that I cannot explain. If you want to call it the Trinity, I don't even know what that means. He and the Father are one. We're talking about some deep, mysterious stuff here. So there are only two men who have ever walked this planet who have that type of a relationship with our Father. And Tracy is right. It is so that everyone will believe not only in the Father, but in his designated intermediary. Now, that means that no priest, no pastor, nobody, not me, can be an intermediary. There's only been two of them on this whole planet. I, or a pastor, or a priest, can be a teacher. We can help you to understand what Moshe and Yeshua said. Remember, there are only two guys. Your whole Bible, all of it, is based on two guys. Because I want you to remember something. Moshe comes along and he hears directly from the Father, and he is literally dictating the first 5 books of your Bible. Okay? Now, all of the other books in the Old Testament, generally speaking, you got some histories and some chronology in there, but they're almost all of them commentating on the first 5 books of the Bible. So it's all about the first 5 books of the Bible. And then Yeshua comes along and gives you an even deeper understanding of what Moshe said. He does not contradict Moshe in any way, shape, or form. Deuteronomy 18, Deuteronomy 13 will tell you that Father's emissaries do not contradict one another. His pastors and teachers and priests certainly do, 100% of the time practically. But Moshe and Yeshua, they fit perfectly together. They do not contradict each other in any way, shape, or form. If they did, in any way, shape, or form, one of them is a false prophet. Right? Am I right? I have to be right. What? Who is it? It's Angela. What's up, Angela?
You mentioned that Moshe was so humble, and we know Yeshua was humble too, and maybe that's the key to being that level of emissary between the Father and his creation, because I think for the rest of us, I don't want to speak for everyone, but you know, generally someone who's teaching or even talking about the Bible is inserting some piece of themselves in that.
It's
Their
a very dangerous
agenda,
job.
their baggage, their
Yeah.
experiences, their misunderstandings, whatever. But
Yep.
it's like those two guys, being the most humble guys ever, just completely wiped themselves out of the picture and let God speak as
Right.
purely
Right.
as possible to the
Right.
people, something that the rest of us just, to one degree or another,
We can't do it.
it's not even
Right.
possible.
And I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's such a great insight, because you know what occurred to me the other day, a couple of weeks ago, is looking at the Shabbat and saying you are commanded every Shabbat and on almost every single holy day, at least the first and the last of those 7 or 8 day festivals, to gather together and or read, if you want to interpret it that way. It doesn't matter. It reminded me of what happened in the book of Nehemiah. When Nehemiah, or Ezra, excuse me, is up on a platform and he is reading the words right out of this book to all the people. And then what happened? The priests and the Levites dispersed themselves into the crowd to help the people understand what had just been read to them. Do you know how, I don't need to tell you this, if you've been to a church in any, not, while back, you know it is really challenging to find a church where a pastor will literally open up the Bible, read it to you, and explain to you what it means. That is very rare. Now do not hear me say that you'll never hear the Bible in church. No. You're going to hear all kinds of passages dropped around here and there, some of them completely ripped out of context, twisted into conformity to fit some preconceived notion of a message that I want to preach. But very rarely will you find a pastor or a teacher who simply opens the book and reads it to you and then tells you what it means. They recognize this part right here is a little bit challenging. I probably ought to explain that to you. You know what I'm saying? That's incredibly rare. But that is the commandment to what we're supposed to be doing. Gathering and reading. And somebody has to explain it, because some of this stuff is a little bit challenging. And we have to research. We have to figure out, not what does it mean to me in my culture in the days I live in, but what did it mean to the guy who wrote it? What did it mean to the people who heard it? That's the important part, not what does it mean to me today. What did it mean to them? And from that, what can I say that it should mean to me today? That's the important question. Vincent.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that how you were talking about how there was a similarity between Moses and Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
It sort of reminded me of a scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 14 through 19, where Moses is telling the people of Israel that God will appoint a prophet like Moses.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was talking about. You are correct, Vincent. And in fact, man, this is the challenging part. If you, as a believer in Yeshua, have any sense that Yeshua comes along and contradicts Moses in any way, you have blown yourself right out of the water. Because why? Because if Yeshua can do that, come along and change the program, then why can't Muhammad? Is it any less valid for Muhammad to come along and say, whoa, 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 God's changed his mind. We got a new program. Or Joseph Smith, or L. Ron Hubbard for that example. Who cares? Somebody can always come along and say, I've got new revelation. The program is changing. If you allow daylight to form between Moshe and Yeshua, you open yourself up to an enormous can of worms where any old Tom, Dick, and Harry can come along with maybe a sign or a wonder, which is exactly what Vince is talking about. I don't care if this person comes along and performs a sign or a wonder or whatever. If he does not speak after the word, if this is not fully connected, you reject it and you kill that prophet because he's trying to lure you away from me. Sorry, folks. There's no difference between Moshe and Yeshua. I mean, let me rephrase that. There is a tremendous difference between Moshe and Yeshua. But in the words that they're speaking and the things that they're trying to tell us, there's a connection there, an intricate connection that cannot be separated. Tracy.
You just assumed it's me this time. You're correct.
What did you say? What?
I said you just assumed it was me this time.
Is Mike next to you?
Yes.
Trying to trick me.
So back at Deuteronomy 18, when it talks about, Yahweh's going to raise up this prophet like Moses, and he's going to put these words in his mouth, and he says, but the prophet that presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him, that prophet has to die. Mm-hmm. So I heard recently that I hadn't thought of it this way, that if indeed Messiah came and changed these words, or did away with these words, they killed him rightfully.
100%.
And I was like, oh,
yeah.
Well, that can't be.
No,
so,
I agree with that 100%. If Yeshua would have disagreed with Moses in any way, shape, or form and taught the people to do likewise, he was absolutely worthy of death, and the Pharisees, Sadducees, and priests did the right thing by crucifying this guy.
And then
yeah.
we don't have...
Hold on, Angela's trying to speak without a microphone. Look at her go. You figure she would know by now.
And then that means we're screwed because we don't have a covering.
Right.
We're all dying now.
Right. Right.
I mean, dying for real. We're going to die, but
yeah,
not.
Of course. No, that's such powerful instruction. Such powerful instruction. Nevertheless, I digress. I apologize for having chewed on your ear for such an extravagant length of time. I do want to get to just a couple of other things before I wrap this up, because I know it's getting late in certain parts of the United States where you guys are. I want us to read a little bit. I want us to read the Ten Commands, because this is super powerful stuff. And I want to talk just a little bit about a couple of them. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you again, and I want to read Exodus chapter 20, or at least a good portion of it. Okay, so you can have your Bible open up to Exodus chapter 20. Now, note that you may not be able to see these colors very well, but I have color-coded the commandments. In chapter 20, verse 1, it says, Then Elohim spoke all these words. Commandment number 1, I am Yah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. That's commandment number 1. Here's commandment number 2. Do not have other gods beside me or in my face. Do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters underneath the earth. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, Yah, your Elohim, am a jealous Elohim, punishing the children for the father's sin to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. Here's the next command. Do not elevate the name of Yah, your Elohim, in vain, because Yah will not leave anyone unpunished who elevates his name in vain. Next command. Remember the Sabbath day, to guard it and keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to Yah, your Elohim. You must not do any work. You, your son or daughter, your male or female servant or slave, your livestock, or the foreigner who is sojourning within your gates. For Yah made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. This is why Yah blessed the Sabbath day and declared it to be holy. Next command, honor your father and your mother, so that you may have a long life in the land that Yah your Elohim is giving you. Next command, do not murder. Next command, do not commit adultery. Next command, do not steal. Next command, do not give false testimony against your neighbor. Next command, do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female slave, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. That is the 10 words. All the people witnessed the thunder and lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountains surrounded by smoke. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. And they said, "You speak to us, and we will listen," they said to Moshe. "But don't let God speak to us anymore, or we will die." That is awesome. That is fantastic. So, number one, I had put on the screen previously this little passage from, I had it in the wrong place, but it was from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. It says, "Now without faith it is impossible to please God, for the one who approaches God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." The point here is that commandment number one is a commandment of faith. It's just the fact that most Christian religions do, whether it's Catholicism or Protestantism, doesn't matter. They start the 10 Commandments at number 3, at verse 3. Do not have any other gods beside me. And then they break them up in a different weird way so that it makes sense to have 10 Commandments. But in all likelihood, I like the Hebrew version of counting these commandments a little bit better, because it just makes a lot more sense. Because you might say, well, the first commandment, I am Yah your Elohim who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Well, that's not a commandment. Oh, but it is. It's a commandment of faith. I exist, and I brought you out of Egypt. If you don't believe in me and trust in me, none of the rest of this instructions is going to make a hill of beans difference. Excuse me?
It's like a statement of faith.
It's a statement of faith, Evan says. That is absolutely correct. If you don't believe that Father exists and that he is the rewarder of those who diligently seek him, then you're not doing any good. Angela, did you want to say something with a microphone?
I'm not sure that they're ever actually called the 10 Commandments in the
No, they're
Bible.
not.
They're the 10 words. And
The
so
10 words,
by
yeah.
calling them the 10 Commandments, we open ourselves up to somebody saying, well, that first one doesn't belong.
Right. That's a good point. That's a good point. So I like the fact that everything proceeds from faith. There are all kinds of commands about the things that you're supposed to do and the things that you're not supposed to do, but if you don't believe that there is an all-powerful God who has the right to issue commands, then it doesn't make any difference. So you must believe that it is Yah, your Elohim, who brought you out of Egypt. Now you can hear the rest of the commands. Luke? Nope, you have not unmuted yourself. Nope, try again.
All right, there we go.
There you go.
All right, you're talking about the commandments being altered, and specifically in the Catholic Bible, they do that. They fixed it to where it eliminates not having idols, as well as not keeping the seventh-day Sabbath holy.
Right,
So,
right. Yep, absolutely right. Brett, what do you got for me, buddy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never heard it said that way. I always have number 1 as verses 1 through 3 as 1, 2 being 4 through 6, 3 being verse 7, and we're in agreement on all those.
Yeah.
But Numbers 23, verse 13 kind of shows you that, and all that I've said to you, take heed, make no mention of the names of other mighty ones. Let it not be heard from your mouth, which goes back to 1 being 1 through 3. I am who? I am Yah. And then you have no other mighty ones against my face. Not I am any other name.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Luke, did you have something additional that you were saying?
Yeah, actually, I didn't finish what I was saying. I was downtown in Eugene when they were doing that Occupy movement or whatever, and we were street preaching, and when I was talking to a lot of the people, we would be talking about scripture, and a verse would come up, and they would quote it back to me, and the homeless people, and it was odd to me. It sounded different, and I realized Catholic Services was down there, and I think that those people have been reading from Catholic Bibles, and I started to look further into that, and I found a lot of changes that the Catholics have made to their own Bible that they pass out compared to, say, like the KJV or the standard Bibles that we read from. And one of them in particular was Revelations 22:14, which says, "Blessed are those that keep the commandments, for they have the right to the tree of life and may enter into the gates into the holy city." And their version says, and also I believe in the NIV, that blessed are those who wash their robes. I thought that was a real whitewashing there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cece.
Hey, Alan. I have like 2 questions.
Okay.
New Testament, Yeshua, he said, these 2 commandments rely on the whole law, right? So love thy neighbor as you do yourself, and then pretty much love me with all your heart. But I don't see that. I don't see the love thy neighbor as you do yourself within these 10 commandments, unless I missed it.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up, and I will tackle that. Please do remind me if I forget, but that's a great question. What's your second question?
How do we navigate not working on a Sabbath, especially if a man is working to provide for his family, and God has not blessed him with another option yet? Like, how do you navigate that commandment and, not hurt God by breaking it?
Excellent question. You have got 2 excellent questions. Thank you for those. Please do remind me, if you raise your hand, you don't even have to speak, and I'll know that I messed you over, and you got to remind me. Now, the first of your questions was in regards to how do we, because there is actually a command in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, I believe, that says you shall love your neighbor as yourself. It is literally stated. However, it's not hard to interpret the 10 commandments in that light. It just takes a little bit of a spiritual eye to see it, okay? Because if you want to, it's real easy to look at the 10 commandments, the 10 words, and say, well, you can pretty easily, it's slightly messy, but it works pretty well to take half of them, the first half, 1 through 5, and put them on the one hand that says, these are vertical commands, like I spoke to you previously. And then the final 5, these are horizontal commands. Not lying, not killing, but murder, adultery, and coveting, these types of things. Stealing, those are horizontal commands. Those are commands that you must not do against your neighbor, or you would not be loving to them. Okay, so you can see it in that regard. So when Yeshua said, I can summarize the greatest of the commands in this 2 ways. Love Yah, your Elohim, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. A very good summation of all of the commands. They fit into one of those 2 categories. In fact, they accurately mirror what I said before with the vertical commands and the horizontal commands. You just have to figure out which ones go where, but it's not that hard. There's a little bit of trickiness in regards to the 10 commandments specifically, and I'm going to continue to call them the 10 commandments because I'm culturally, acclimated to do so. But consider that they do fit into a nice, neat category in that way. Now, in regards to your second question regarding Shabbat, hold on to your pants, because I'm going to come to that in a moment. First of all, I want to say that command number one is a command of faith. You must believe that this God exists and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek his face. Number two is you shall not have any other gods or any other thing, man-made or otherwise, in his face, the Hebrew text literally says, worship them or make images of them. Anything you trust in besides him is in his face. Remember that I've taught you many times that our God is a destroyer of idols. He is a destroyer of other gods. So anything you place between you and him that is acting as a god in your life, he will destroy it. And the harder you're gripping onto it, the more hurt you're going to experience when he destroys that idol in your life. Also, no symbols or images to represent him in any way, shape, or form. Okay? As we get into iconoclasty here, especially with the Catholic Church. Protestants not so much, but I know some Hebrew roots people that are pretty vehemently against people wearing crosses because they think that that might actually violate this command. And you know what? I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. I wouldn't be hardcore about that, but I could see where they're coming from with saying, you know what? I don't know that I should wear a cross because this is kind of symbolic in some way and it kind of offends my conscience. Okay, that's fine. Now don't go around beating everybody over the head and telling them, getting after people who wear crosses and coming after your brothers and sisters and imposing your fence. Don't take one of your fence posts out of your fence and beat them over the head with it. But I see where you're coming from. I'm fine with that. Now, next thing. Lifting up his name in vain. Commandment number 3. Now I want to show you a couple slides because this is fascinating, and Tracy and I talked about this years ago, and I feel the need to continuously remind you of this because it is so important, and many of us have been taught in Christianity, Judaism teaches the same thing, that the important thing here is that you not use the Father's name. You've probably seen Monty Python where they're stoning people for saying Yehovah or Jehovah or whatever. It's all in hilarious good fun. And yet, that's probably not what's going on here. But let me share with you this screen, okay? You can see here that it says in verse 7, do not elevate. That's a pretty good translation. Lift up the name of Yud-He-Vav-He, your Elohim, in vain. And that's repeated again at the end of the verse. Elevates his name in vain. Now here's the important thing. The Hebrew word lift up or take, as in his name, is nasa. It means to lift, to carry, to affirmingly lift up, as in one's hand, in a solemn declaration or an oath. And then in vain is shav, evil, ruin, in a form of guile, as in idolatry, or in uselessness, or falsely, or without having any power. That's what in vain means, for no real reason. It's not efficacious. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It's like a stick of dynamite that you light on fire and you throw it and it's a dud. It doesn't do anything. Right? That's in vain. So when you translate this literally, it means you shall not bear or lift up or affirmingly raise your hand to swear an oath to Yah, your Elohim, for evil, for ruin, being filled with guile, in an idolatrous sense, for usefulness, being false, or being vain. Now, Tracy and I, probably 8 years ago, had a teaching on this, and we decided that our best interpretation was that this has nothing to do with pronouncing the name of God, doesn't have anything to do with using God's name in a blasphemous way, I would certainly suggest to you that that's a bad idea. But what I would most like to tell you is, to me and to others I know, what is most represented here is you declaring, I am a follower of Yah, and letting everybody know around you, I am a follower of Yah. And yet, they look at your behavior and you are not a follower of Yah. You do not reflect the instructions of Yah. You are not a representative of Yah. You do not follow him. You do not reflect his character. You do not bring order to chaos. You create chaos. Now you are taking his name in vain. He will not leave one unpunished who takes his name to himself and behaves badly. Is a bad example. It is because of you, many of you, me, in our behavior, that you can ask anybody out there in the world who is not a believer, how come you're not a believer? Oh, they're all a bunch of hypocrites. 100%. I can't blame them at all. Because we have given our Heavenly Father a bad name. We have made him look foolish. Because people say, if these are the followers of this God, I don't want anything to do with this God. Why would I want to hang out with a bunch of people like this, who are hoity-toity and holy rollers, and yet you get them alone in private and they act a completely different way? They're hypocrites. That's a terrible tragedy, and I personally think that that's what it means when it says, you shall not lift up the name of your Heavenly Father in vain. Now, it's a heck of a lot easier to say, well, no, it just means you shouldn't use God's name inappropriately. It is very easy. Very easy. Much easier to deal with. One moment, and I'm going to come to Lonnie. Evan, would you like to be excused? Yeah.
Yes.
Would you like to be excused?
Are you kicking me out?
No, I'm just asking.
Okay, I'll, if it's only a few more minutes, I can.
You can go at any time you like, bud. Okay, sorry about that. Lonnie, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, I was, before you mentioned the word hypocrite, I was always thinking that being a hypocrite, Jesus made reference to being the Pharisees, Sadducees being hypocrites, but I never saw it as a sin written anywhere. And now you reveal that it has been there all along in the 10 words, because we had, poor translations, poor teaching on that. And so being a hypocrite really is a sin.
Yeah, I really do think so, man. It's a bad one, too. Yeshua had really, really bad things to say about these hypocrites, and he hated hypocrisy. It was a really bad thing to him. And here I'm going to let Mike or Tracy, whoever that happens to be, say something, but I'm going to say something else that's going to be controversial, and Angela might throw things at me. Just watch for flying objects. Mike or Tracy, go ahead.
I'm glad I'm getting in before this. So, the whole idea of taking his name upon you too is interesting when you think about marriage and how you take the name of your husband. And this covenant that they're making here is essentially a marriage covenant. So he's saying, don't agree to this, don't take my name on you, and then go out and misrepresent me.
That is, I think that it fits beautifully in this context of them having a marriage ceremony and taking his name upon them. I think it fits beautifully in that context. Now, I want to bring in a secondary consideration. Many of us have learned some Hebrew and have watched some Nehemiah Gordon or whoever else online and have decided that we are very, very good at Hebrew, and we have determined the correct and proper way to pronounce the name of this most holy being in the universe. And we love to just throw it around there with casual familiarity. I think that that is precisely the reason that the rabbis became so zealous for the name YHVH. They did not want, rightly or wrongly, they may have made some mistakes here, but I think that they may not have wanted your common everyday guy with the name of this most powerful being on his mouth to just drop around at random. Because that can very easily become incredibly disrespectful. It becomes common. It's no longer holy, okay, if you will. Now grant me a little leeway here for a second. So I see that potential where the rabbis literally conspired together to say, okay, we are not going to reveal the correct pronunciation of this name to the common people because we don't want it just out there on the street being flung around with careless ease. This is a holy God, and his name is special. So I got no problem necessarily interpreting this passage in that way, to some degree. But here's the important thing. Could you use it flippantly and lift it up in vain in that way, in a much more mundane way? Yes. Yes, you could. Now here's the other thing. Remember I spoke briefly a moment ago about how Paul said, hey, if my brother is offended by me eating meat sacrificed to an idol, I'll never eat meat again. Now I want you to consider that to a Jew, you running around throwing out the name is highly offensive. Highly offensive. Because they revere the name of YHVH. Now, are we supposed to be a witness to our Jewish brothers and sisters to bring them to Messiah? Well, they couldn't do that because the Christians taught them a bunch of stuff that is totally an abomination to them. And unfortunately, we might stumble into some traps here ourselves by them thinking, whoa, people just dropping the holy name around like it's nothing, that's blasphemy. These people could not possibly be following our Father in heaven by just randomly dropping the holy name of God in their conversation at any old time. Now, I'm not throwing any of you under the bus. I am asking you to search your hearts and consider what I say. This is not open for discussion necessarily. We're not going to have a discussion about it. Sorry, Osmundo. Not going to open that can of worms. I just wanted to make my position known. It's not even a position. It's just a consideration. Think about what I have said. Just consider that. Did you want to say something about that in particular?
I wanted to say that the position of trying to like keep the name and trying to keep the pronunciation on part of the rabbis, it reminds me of what Catholics would do when they wouldn't give the common people a translation of the Bible they could read. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, I don't trust you with this. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give it to you. But it's the intention might be, or might not be, depending on how pure they were, which I don't think they were. At least on the outside would be, you're going to twist this around if I give it to you, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really lead to anything better. Like, you kind of have to trust the common people with that thing, and it's something that when, like, Christ died, he gave us access way to the Father. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of, he got rid of those mediaries between us. So we should be able to know or have access to those kinds of things.
I totally agree. And yet, unfortunately, the rabbis pretty successfully hid the name from us in the Bible. But I know that there's scholars out there who say, no, I've got the way to do it. I know how you should say it correctly. And I'm saying, okay, that's fine. But should you? Just for your consideration. I do. You're not going to hear me say I don't. But I feel like I have to be careful sometimes. Osmundo, go ahead, buddy.
No, I was going to actually say I just typed it in the chat, but I actually agree with that. That's the way I interpreted this command all these years. is bringing his name to nothing, like just common, like somebody, somebody saying, hey, I want to name my child this, or I want to put it on a t-shirt. And it's just very kind of common as opposed to the most holy name in the universe.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel a little weird when I use it a little too familiarly. So I often say Yah. It's a contentious issue. And I don't want to cause any problem with it. Well, yes, exactly. So I don't want to cause contention with it, but it just bothers me sometimes.
I understand that the way you use that pronunciation or a name that you say, the syllables that come out of your mouth, I understand that respect starts there. But when you think about the scope of damage done, it's that hypocrisy and misrepresentation that has thousands and thousands of people who won't even consider God or that don't even understand who he is. The scope of that has so much more damage to it than, I mean, what is the max amount of damage you could do to him with
mispronouncing his name?
Right, that level. I understand respect starts there.
Sure.
But the scope of it is so much larger. I would hate for us to get stuck there
Right.
and not move into the weightier matter, which is how we represent him.
That, I think, is, if you were to take nothing from that conversation other than what she just said, let it be that. The pronunciation of the name and all this other stuff and how you should say it and whether you should or should not, that's the real baseline practical level. What it means on a deeper level and you representing him, that is the deeper level. So let's consider that at the very least. Now, Cece mentioned the Sabbath day. Just a couple of general observations, and I'm going to wrap this thing up here in just a sec. I apologize for keeping you late, man. The text says specifically that you are to work for 6 days. I think that's often overlooked. That's not a suggestion. It doesn't say you may work for 6 days, but on the seventh you have to rest. It says, no, you should work for 6 days. Now, am I saying you must work on Sunday? No. But what I am saying is you should probably be productive. Doesn't mean you have to go to work, or I'm telling you go and at least do some work, go and mow your yard on Sunday. No, I'm saying Father is telling us you have 6 days to be productive. Use them wisely because the time is in short supply and I ain't making no more of it. So use those days. Be productive. Be generative. But you on the seventh day shall not work, period. Okay? Now, you get to the question of what is work. That's a big can of worms. Halakha, you can look at the Jewish writings. It'll be a catastrophe. There are lots of definitions of what work is. I am not going to lay out for you as your rabbi or your holy man or your teacher or something a clear-cut definition of what work is. I will tell you this, I do not conduct my own business, whatever it is that I do to make money on Shabbat. However, I have clients of mine who do the work of the kingdom on Shabbat. I have a pastor, for example, that I work for. And sometimes he asks me to do work on Shabbat. And you know what I'll do? I'll do it. Because it is the work of the kingdom. Now, he's of a different faith than me. But I don't care. He's preaching Yeshua to the best of his knowledge and ability, to a group of people in the best of their knowledge and ability. And I am moving forward the kingdom of our Father by working in a church on Shabbat. Or doing some paperwork or something that he needs. I would prefer not to. And I let him know. I prefer to not do anything on Shabbat if it's all possible. But if you have something that needs to be done on Shabbat in order to move your ministry forward, I'll do it. Now, Yeshua gave similar instructions. You know, is it wrong? The Hebrew rabbis had interpreted that it was wrong to rub heads of grain together. And theoretically, if you were threshing grain on Shabbat, that is indeed work. That's a violation of the Sabbath rules. But to do it on a small level, just to feed yourself, is that a violation of Shabbat? Yeshua didn't think so. Now, some people I have heard say, well, no, he was talking about, they were gonna starve. No, they weren't likely gonna starve in a 24-hour period just because they couldn't eat. He was saying it's permissible to feed oneself on Shabbat, even if that does mean that I have to rub my hands together and blow the chaff away from the grain so that I can eat them. I would equate that to going into my fridge, grabbing some bread, grabbing some turkey, some cheese, some mayonnaise, and making myself a sandwich. Or throwing a little something into the microwave and pushing the button. Now, am I going to tell my wife, Angela, I demand a 4-course meal here for Sabbath lunch? No, because that's going to require my wife to do quite a bit of work on Shabbat. That's not really appropriate. Now, if we want to get up in the morning on Shabbat and we want to work together as a family and have some fun cooking some chicken sausages and some eggs and some pancakes and making a fun time out of it and eating together, well, I suppose if you wanted to be pharisaical, you could say, by golly, Alan, that's work and you are going to burn in hell. You are welcome to send me there, sir. I'm just going to go ahead and say, no, I don't think so. If you got to feed yourself, of course you should do it with as little work as possible. That's just my standard. I try not to do anything to make money on Shabbat. I won't go out and make somebody else work for me on Shabbat by going to an amusement park or going out to lunch or something. I just don't do that because that's a fairly clear violation. But, making myself some food, rubbing some heads of grain and feeding myself, that's fine. Now, Cece mentioned a moment ago, well, what about people who have jobs that require them to work on Shabbat? 100% excellent question. So now here's the thing. Does the job that you're doing save lives? Are you a doctor, a nurse, an ambulance driver, an ER doctor or something? Go to work. If you're doing something that could be done on any other day of the week, find a different job. If at all possible. Pray to our Father. Actively seek for a different job, if you can. Now, you might say, but my job that I have now that requires me to work on Shabbat is a good paying job and I've been there for so long. Yeah, that could hurt. What's important? Money or obedience? Now, I am of the opinion that Father honors your willingness to obey Him. So that if you, and this would not surprise me at all if this were to happen. You say, man, I have a job right now and I'm earning $150,000 a year and I have to work on Shabbat at least a couple days a month. I hate it, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to pray to God and I'm going to ask Him to bring me another job. It would not surprise me at all if Father presented you with a job that was only going to pay you $100,000 a year. And you demonstrated a desire to be obedient and said, I'm taking the job. I'm taking a $50,000 pay cut. I am cutting my pay by 1/3 because I want to be obedient. It's the best job I can find. I'll figure out a way to live on $100,000. It is my suspicion that Father would look at that and say, I really appreciate you. I'm going to promote you. Stay in that position for a couple months. I'll get you another job worth $150,000. Just give me a couple months. I really appreciate your willingness to obey. I'll fix this up for you. Or I'll remove some of your bills and you won't need $150,000. You can live on $100,000 easily. Whatever it is. That's just my position. If you don't have a job that you're saving people's lives, or you're doing really emergency work like a firefighter or a police officer, where you have a job that is requiring you to work to serve others, and I don't mean like burgers and fries at McDonald's, I mean life-saving, life-giving services, that's fine. Regular services that somebody could get any old day of the week, you should probably look for another option. Look for another opportunity. Be willing to make a sacrifice. I apologize if that offended any of you. There's nothing I can do about it. Cece, did that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you not like my answer? Would you like me to give another one?
No. It's just sometimes I try to process it, especially in the Babylonian kingdom that we live in. So sometimes those things can be challenging. And so, absolutely, I'll be praying for my husband.
Yeah.
As well for our family. I also know that, men are supposed to take care of their families, and sometimes it's a struggle, like, hey, if my husband prayed for this job and God opened that door, what does that mean? Overall, why would he open the door for us to disobey him directly? So
That's called a test. That's called a test.
Then leave it. I don't know. So it's just a lot of prayer. Please.
I feel you. We're all struggling with these various areas, Cece, and I appreciate you. We will pray. God grant you wisdom and discernment in that regard. D.
Hey, I just wanted to encourage her. Maybe this might help. I don't know. My late husband, when we first came into the walk a few years ago, he used to work for Verizon, and it was really weird. He had been with them so long and had been on a really good schedule, and he wasn't working on Shabbat. And then all of a sudden, we start doing Torah like consistently and following everything, and then lo and behold, the next schedule swap comes up, and it was him working on Shabbat. So what we did was we just came up with a letter. So sometimes the Father wants us to step out and see, what we will, what we can do on our own for him. So what we did is we just came up with a letter and said, this conflicts.
I need another battery for my camera.
Belief, and then he said, I'll volunteer to work on a different time or work extra, but it worked out to where he was able to, on that day, on Fridays, to be off at a certain time. And so just by stepping out and just asking and sending in a letter to the human resources took care of it. So I don't know. It's just an idea that encouraged.
Yeah. Absolutely. Excellent insight. I appreciate you guys. You got such amazing insights. And I'm going to just say, you may experience my camera dying here in just a second because we've been going longer than normal, and I apologize. If you want to sign off at any time and go to sleep, you go right ahead. It's okay. But my camera's probably going to die here in a second, and I'm waiting for a replacement battery. I may go dead for just a second, but I'm coming back, and I swear I'm wrapping this thing up here in just a sec. If my camera dies, you just keep on talking. And I'm going to let Gabby talk while I change this battery. Neither of those. Ask Evan to get you an A7S3 battery. There's one on the charger. Thank you. Go ahead.
So is it CC or Sir Steel, or is that the same?
We call her CC.
Okay, CC. In Deuteronomy 10:12, it says, "And now, Israel, what is it Yahweh your Elohim asking of you, but to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being." That's not the one I was looking for, but it says he wants to test you and to prove you, to see if it's in your heart to obey him. So I think it's maybe Deuteronomy 8:2. I can't remember, but that's in my mind all the time, because to me, the us living on earth, we're in our testing period. He's checking our heart to see if we're going to obey him or not.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to say.
100%. Can you guys hear me okay again? Okay, good. Quick change, artist there. I am going to thank you guys for sharing your thoughts and ideas regarding these things. Final word in regard to the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. I want to encourage you to look at that a little bit more carefully. And I'm just going to share this final slide with you. And this is for you younger people, especially you kids. Take a look at this, because this is that word, you shall honor your father and mother. This is the word kavod, from which we get the word kavod. Does anybody know what the Hebrew word kavod means? Just pipe it up. Go ahead.
Is it forever?
No.
Means liver, heavy.
It means glory, heaviness. It means, this is where this word kaved means, whoa, that is really powerful. That's a heavy concept. This is where we get the word glory, or glory comes from this. Kavod is glory. They beheld the glory, meaning, whoa, that is really powerful. That was really nerve-wracking. Just like the people said, whoa, don't let Father talk to us anymore, we're all going to die. They were experiencing this heavy, this can be in either a good or a bad sense. Heavy, burdensome, severe in a bad sense, or powerful, rich, honorable in a good sense, weighty, a really serious thing. So when it says to you in this command, that you shall honor your father and your mother, in verse 12, it says you must give tremendous weight to the words that come out of your father and your mother's mouth, which is exactly what Moshe did when his father-in-law came around. He bowed with his face to the ground. He listened carefully to the instructions, the wisdom that was coming from his father-in-law, and he said, that's a great idea. You're right. But note what Jethro said to him. If it seems good to you and Father wills it, then you should do this. And Moshe weighed those words and he said, yep. Now notice also that this is the commandment that comes with a promise, so that you may have a long life in the land that Yah your Elohim is giving you. Those are some powerful, powerful words. So, you kids, you young people, even me, if you have a father or mother that is alive, and this is also true of elders, okay? Give great weight and honor to the people in your life, especially your natural parents, especially if they love you and are honorable people. Give great weight to what they say. It literally means, whoa, every time my father speaks, I should be very, very careful to hear very carefully to what he's about to say, because Father told me I must, and it actually carries with it a blessing of extra life. Angela?
I think for the longest time I thought honor your father and mother was like make sure they get a Mother's Day card and a Father's Day card and that kind of honor. But this whole idea of not taking them lightly, giving weight to their words, I realized how much I did it. That when my father and mother would say something, I'd be like, oh, yeah, whatever.
What did I do?
That
I
right
rolled
there,
my eyes.
that rolling your eyes, saying, yeah, whatever, or just that.
Or just ignoring them.
That is taking them lightly. And that is so much bigger than, that form of dishonor. I thought it meant to not just talk terrible about them, but just to take their words lightly. that's serious. That's
It's very-
big.
It's very serious. Absolutely. Gabby.
I actually did not mean to raise my hand.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay.
It was Deuteronomy 8:2.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir Cece.
Yes. So what if your father is telling you to do something very unwise that goes against what our Heavenly Father has instructed us to do?
That's a great question. And let's do just let's just do a brief role play, okay? My earthly father comes to me and says, "Alan, you ought to consider doing this." Yeah, Cece's great at these awesome questions, Jay. So I would say, I think that the best thing you could do is listen very carefully and say, "Dad, I really appreciate you sharing your words of wisdom with me. I'm going to consider them carefully. I'm going to pray about them, and I'm going to seek some additional wisdom too. But I really value your input." And then you weigh it, and you counsel with others. And if your father has indeed given you some words that are not full of wisdom, what you do from that point is going to be a little bit more challenging. It might mean you don't bring it up again. It might mean that you reveal to your father, those were good words of wisdom. They just weren't right for me at the right time. I really felt like I was hearing from other people and my Father in heaven who just kind of steered me a different way. But don't think I don't really appreciate your input. I don't know. That would be a really hard thing to do, but that's the best that I could come up with, to not dishonor him. But you know what I'm saying?
But Alan, what if your father is worldly? You have a lot of worldly fathers out there that their advice is not wise. They're not wise. They're worldly, and it could be, okay, let's role play.
Yeah.
What if your father is telling you, "Hey, son, you're too young to be settling down, so you need to go out there and you need to
sow your wild oats."
Yes.
Yeah.
Explore your wild oats. You don't need to be getting young. You don't need to be getting married. You're too young for that. Cut it out. Do what I told you to do.
I feel you. Okay. Angela would like to pipe in.
Okay, so if you have a father like that, I think you honor him by not doing that. because listen, I mean, how many times have you seen horrible parents who turn out a kid that is just stellar?
Yeah.
That honors them, that kid did not follow their advice.
Yes, that's actually a good point, that you could actually honor your father by not doing what he said to do. However, when you speak to him about it, you should be respectful. I guess that was what I was saying. I'm going to go to Mike, and then Bryce, and then Gabby.
Yeah, I was gonna say honor and obedience aren't necessarily the same thing. Like if you have a worldly or toxic parent, you can still pay them honor without doing what they said, especially if what they said causes you to transgress God's command. And I always like to also point out, like the scripture that says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." It says "in the Lord" in there. So that's another one that I think toxic parents will misuse as well, saying you're supposed to obey me, and you're supposed to honor. But when it's just like in our world where it's like I work for somebody who's I'm supposed to submit to, but if they tell me to do something that God said not to do, I cannot do that.
Right.
And also when you're no longer under your parents' authority, like as a woman especially, but when you grow up, you're no longer a child.
Yeah.
Children obey your parents. You're now an adult, and so that role changes as well. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was something to point out.
That totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Okay, Bryce, what's the word on the street? Nope, you have not unmuted yourself. You have still not unmuted yourself. Come on, dude, you work in IT, man. What's up? Have you tried turning it off and then on again? No, it ain't working, dude.
Give a second.
I'm giving you got time, Bryce. You take your time, buddy. Try to unplug it and plug it back in. You dial it in, man. Do whatever. No dice. No, sir. Type it. Type a message. Do you have a typing writer? Can you type it? He's going to try. We'll see what happens. I'm going to Gabby, I think. Were you going to say something, Gabby?
I think Tracy or Angela said what I was going to say.
Okay,
so.
okay. Osmundo, you can talk, but keep your eye peeled in case Bryce's words of wisdom pop up on the screen.
Okay, sounds good. I believe in this situation we lean on the clarification from Yeshua. The first scripture that came to mind was when he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but those who leave mother, father, brother, sister for my sake shall be blessed in this life and the life to come. So when we look in that direction, then we're leaning more on Yeshua and Jehovah than our natural parents.
That is a good insight. And I actually thought of that when someone was talking a minute ago about Yeshua and kind of making distinctions here, that it did come to mind that Yeshua did say, I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword, and to set a man against his kids and the kids against their father and mother-in-law against daughter. I mean, this is going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to treat somebody with disrespect. What does the commandment say? To obey or to weigh heavy their words? That's a great question, Bryce. And the commandment says to weigh heavy. It says, you shall honor your father and mother. Give them great weight. It literally just says great weight. It doesn't even say specifically to their words. It just says great weight. You shall give great weight to your mother and father, to your parents. Okay, so it doesn't even necessarily say about their words. It just means great weight. And I say that means tremendous respect and honor. So if you have an ungodly parent who is trying to steer you the wrong way, yeah, Angela said previously, you might be honoring them by not doing what they say. It doesn't mean you should disrespect them, but it also might mean, like Cece was saying a moment ago, unfortunately, I've mentioned this a few times, and this is the most difficult challenge of living a holy life, and that is actually separating yourself from family members who are toxic and poisonous and who would love nothing more than to see you dragged through the mud to make an ass out of you, because they'd love to see you stumble and fall. They'd love to see you drag your name through the mud. That's just what they do. That's how they are. They are not of the same spirit as you. Now, you can still be honorable to these people, but I have people like that in my life who I can speak kindly to them. I can be friendly and sociable and amiable, but I only see them once a year, and I'm not going to extend an invitation into my home. I'm not going to say we should go out to dinner. I'm just not going to do that because I don't want to do that. We are not of the same spirit. I can still treat them with great respect. Does that make sense? So there you have it, folks.